Before I educated myself on family violence, I didn't realize what was happening was abuse. There weren't bruises, there weren't any scars. I wasn't trying to explain accidentally falling down a flight of stairs. But there was shouting, and there was silence, and there was self blame, and there was this growing sense that I was somehow lost. I kept trying harder in the relationship to fix what I thought was broken. I apologized more and more frequently for the things I didn't do, and I was walking on eggshells so small I could not hear my own thoughts. But the truth is, family violence often shows up in your internal psychology long before you put a name to what you're experiencing. For men, this recognition can be really hard. We're taught to be strong, to be stoic, to be the provider, the problem solver. We're told to man up, take it on the chin, and push through. We don't reach out about problems like this, and we definitely don't speak up. So when something feels wrong, we end up internalizing it. We assume that we are somehow the problem. Society tells us we have roles to play, and we try to play them, even if that means we stay in something that is harming us. We're told abuse mostly comes from men. And if a woman is treating you poorly, then you must have done something to have deserved it. Her abuse is justified. Your defense is controlling. We're told we're physically stronger, so we must be the ones doing any damage. And most of all, we're told abuse has to be physical, that unless it leaves a mark, it doesn't count. But emotional and psychological abuse does leave marks, just not on your skin. It shows up in how you think and how you behave, how you see yourself and how you sleep. So if you're in a fog and you're confused, and if you're tired and you're doubting yourself, then this video might help. So today, what we're going to do is step through 8 of the most common psychological signs that you might be experiencing if you're a victim of family violence. These aren't the outward behaviors like financial controlling or stonewalling or gaslighting that you find in the blueprint. Those are the tactics of abuse. This video is about the impact of abuse, about what this does to your nervous system, your thoughts, and your sense of self. These signs can build up slowly and quietly. You might not recognize them at first. In fact, you might not even recognize them until after you've left, but they're real. And unfortunately, I've lived every one of them. Sign one is hypervigilance. This is where you're always on edge. You're scanning for subtle shifts in her tone, her expression, her body language. You're bracing yourself for the next explosion or guilt trip. You're anticipating her every need. And even in calm moments, your nervous system is still on high alert. You're always on edge. You're always listening. You're always planning and preparing. Even after I moved out, after we'd separated, I was still hypervigilant. I remember staying with my mother for a period, and as she walked up the hallway, I did a hurried self check when she was approaching. Where's my phone? I better pretend I'm busy. I better look like I'm actually being useful. This wasn't about being helpful, this was fear. I was anticipating danger before it arrived. Sign two is brain fog. This is where you might feel drained even after a full night's sleep. You're in a fog, you can't concentrate, things don't seem very clear to you. This mental exhaustion's not laziness, it's survival mode. Your brain is stuck in a loop of stress that steals your clarity, your energy, and your motivation. Personally, I'd spend hours going over history and conversations and things that were said in my head, just trying to figure out what had I done wrong. I'd prepare for what might happen next, going through scenario and scenario after scenario, trying to figure out what might set her off next. Mentally, I was exhausted and I couldn't think clearly. I used to be quick and sharp with my words. I could hold my own, but nowadays I have slowed down. I doubt every sentence I say before I say it, and my brain is a fog. Sign 3 is mood swings. This is where it might feel like you're snapping at minor things or you're shutting down completely when someone challenges you or criticizes you. This is your fawn, fight, or flight response in overdrive. These are protective responses. When you've been constantly attacked, invalidated, and when any hint of criticism can feel like a threat to your worth or your safety, your overdrive kicks in. I wasn't feeling myself. I'd feel waves of shame and sadness and guilt over small things. Sometimes I'd feel angry, not because of what was happening now, but because of how trapped I felt. I'd even show emotions to my abuser, not because that's what I felt, but because that's what I thought would be the safest thing to do. It was a survival mechanism. For example, I'd complain about things I wasn't genuinely upset about just to match her mood. It wasn't honesty, it was survival. Sign 4 is an emotional disconnect. This is where you might struggle to cry, laugh, or feel joy in the moment. You might feel like you're just going through the motions in life. This emotional shutdown is a form of self protection. When you've been invalidated, dismissed, or even punished for having needs or feelings, you end up shutting down. Personally, I stopped feeling joy. Even when I was with my children, I'd stop being in the moment. They are the most important part of my world. I'd laugh, but I wouldn't be fully there. I wasn't numb because I didn't care. I was numb because I'd been taught that any real emotion would be used against me. Sign 5 is memory lapses. You may find yourself zoning out during conversations, forgetting important details, or feeling foggy headed. This is a common trauma response. Your mind has had to block out pain to protect you. Sometimes memory around key incidences, especially those involving gaslighting, can feel blurred or incomplete. For me personally, it felt like there were almost three versions of me, or so I felt. There was this one that knew everything that was happening. There was this one that didn't remember any of it. And there was this third that was just trying to figure out what was happening and why there was two different versions of me. Gaslighting doesn't just twist the facts, it fogs up your memory. I'd forget entire conversations. I'd question whether things really happened the way I remembered. And eventually, I just stopped trusting my own memory. Sign 6 is self doubt. Abuse often leaves you second guessing everything, your decisions, your memory, even your character. You may find yourself thinking, was I overreacting? Or maybe it was my fault. This self doubt is a learned response from prolonged blame and gaslighting and criticism, and it can make healing and parenting and trusting yourself really hard. I lost my sense of self. I second guessed everything, how I parented, how I spoke, even who I was in my character. I'd start writing messages and then delete them. I'd ask people questions I already knew the answer to. I'd stop trusting my own instincts because I'd been told over and over again that I was wrong. Sign 7 is shame and guilt. You might find yourself constantly apologizing, trying harder to please, or blaming yourself for their moods. Even when you're being mistreated, you feel like you caused it. This internalized shame is often a direct result of their manipulation. It's not a reflection of your character. This one's hard to say out loud because as a man, you're supposed to protect and provide and stay strong. But I felt like a failure. Not because I was failing, but because I couldn't fix it. I thought that if I was a better man, stronger, calmer, more capable, I could make her happy. I could make the abuse stop. But abuse doesn't stop because you improve, it stops when you leave. Sign 8 is sleep issues. This is where you might struggle to fall asleep or wake up in the middle of the night in a panic or have nightmares that are foggy, but they replay conflicts and fears or this general feeling of helplessness. This is a common occurrence in trauma survivors, especially when abuse was emotional or psychological and it's harder to name. For me, sleep became a battleground, and in some cases it still is. I'd lie in bed for hours, physically exhausted, but unable to switch off. Some nights I'd wake up in a sweat with my heart pounding, like my body remembered something that I couldn't. And when I did sleep, I'd have dreams that kind of blurred the past and the present and would leave me rattled and exhausted the next day. If any of these signs sound familiar to you, it's not weakness, it's not failure, it's not who you really are. These are signs of survival. They're signs of being stuck in a dynamic that was not safe. You can find your way back to yourself. You can reclaim your strength. You can feel again. You can parent with presence. And yes, you can stand again. No matter how many times you've been knocked down, you can stand again. Visit standagain.com.au to explore the blueprint and begin your recovery. Thank you.